Thank you. Thank you, Susan, and thank you, Mary. Let's see now. All right. October of 2001. The United States was still reeling from the events of September 11th. Although air travel had been shut down, it was lifted on September 13th, and many people still feared flying, but they didn't fear going to their mailbox, not yet. The citizens of Boca Raton had no indication that we would become the focus of worldwide media coverage and the top story for 9 straight days. Boca Raton Fire Rescue is proud of their hazardous materials team and their technicians. We have top-notch equipment, apparatus, people. And the Anthrax Attack became one of our longest events. For at least 9 straight days, we had units on scene and had to be refueled at site. We have mobile refueling capabilities for diesel. So it was the longest event, if you want to know, was actually the fire out on West Glades Road that we had. We had a 2-week investigation after that one. It was the branding iron fire. That was the longest call we ever were on, 2 weeks straight, having assistance from ATF and from the State Fire Marshal. So the program outline, this program will retrace the chronological sequence of events that impacted here in Boca Raton from October 2001 until today. And much of this focuses on what occurred here in Boca Raton, although there were anthrax attacks as well in Washington, D.C., and in New York City, and in Connecticut, and other places. Disclaimer, I want to read this. The research sources include archived newspaper media, video news reports, books on the subject, and personal recollections of the author. I was Deputy Fire Chief at Boca Raton Fire Rescue at the time, and additionally the Fire Chief was out of town. He had gone to Europe, and I was the Acting Fire Chief during the earliest parts of the incident. The other disclaimer is I am not an expert. However, the authors of the 10 books on the subject do qualify, and you may wish to read one or more of those books that I identify in this program. I also handed out a list of the books that I used as research material. It all started on September 18, 2001, although we didn't know it at the time because that's when the person who sent the letters had them postmarked in Trenton, New Jersey. It was just 7 days after 9/11. The letter did arrive at the AMI building in the mail and several other locations, including NBC News in New York. That was the one letter that was recovered, although it wasn't recovered right away. The AMI letter and envelope were not recovered as evidence because AMI routinely incinerated all their old mail. Between September 28th and October 4th, on September 28th, AMI photo editor Robert Stevens was on vacation coming back from North Carolina, and he had his first indication that he was sick. When he got home to Florida, his wife took him to Lantana, to JFK Medical Center on October 2nd to be treated for his illness. And on October 4th, Dr. Gene Malecki, Palm Beach County Health Department, publicized that there was an anthrax exposure in an infected patient. And the CDC was notified, and they sent a team to JFK Hospital. At the same time, September 28th, to start, Ernest Blanco, another AMI co-worker, who was also a person that delivered the mail in the AMI building, fell ill and was taken to Cedars, Lebanon Medical Center on October 1st. So he was sick between the 28th, roughly the same time as Mr. Stevens, and he sought treatment October 1st. He was in critical condition by October 5th, and a gentleman from the Florida Public Health Laboratory linked the 2 cases pretty quickly, and he suspected it was delivered by the mail and that it was an intentional act. He figured all that out pretty quickly. I'm sure he shared it with some people. Ernesto was given high doses of antibiotics, and he made a full recovery, and as far as I know, he's still okay today. October 5th to the 8th, on October 5th, AMI photo editor Robert Stevens died at JFK Medical Center from his anthrax disease, from being attacked by it. On October 7, 2001, the Palm Beach Post subtitle reads, "Odds are very long that Robert Stevens' death was the result of some sort of terrorist act." In the same article, Florida Governor Jeb Bush was quoted saying, "This is a cruel coincidence, that's all it is." And on October 8th, the Palm Beach County Health Department quarantined the AMI building in Boca Raton. October 5th, also going back to that, at the close of business on that day, the FBI went in without any masks, without any fanfare, without the hazmat suits, the moon suits, no protective gear at all, and at 5 o'clock they took samples of all kinds of areas. People were still in the building, they hadn't left yet. 2 of those 56 samples tested positive for anthrax. And again, that led to the October 8th shutdown and quarantine of the building. On October 10th is when things kicked into high gear. The FBI sent multiple hazardous materials teams to Boca Raton. It was probably the largest contingent of hazardous materials people all at one time. The role of our fire department was to provide support to them and to help them decon as they exited the building. We didn't actually go in the building because they were to go in and collect evidence. We were to stay outside and help them clean up as they came out. The gentlemen that you see in these white suits are us, and that's an FBI agent that we're cleaning up as he came out. An article in the Palm Beach Post acknowledges anthrax was modified, and the probe points to something other than natural exposure. This was the first acknowledgement that it was a terrorist incident. So our role was decontamination. This is what the scene looked like. The photograph of our hazmat truck was on national news for about 9 days straight. If you tune to CNN, that's what you saw. Great backdrop. I think Glenn was responsible for getting that flag up on top of the truck. Were you, Glenn? Yeah, that was one of the things that he did. We made national covers of Newsweek, the New York Times, People magazine, and many other publications throughout the country. October 10th, local impact. Not only were we dealing with the actual real anthrax incident, but powder scares started to pop up all over the place. And let me read this to you. While the AMI building was still the focus of the FBI investigation, suspicious powder calls flooded fire rescue agencies here and elsewhere. Some were people reacting in fear to dust found under a cash register, and I was on that call. While others were mischievous copycat people sending non-harmful powders by mail as pranks. This raised the level of apprehension even higher. Many people started opening their U.S. mail in the open air and just dumping their mail in the garbage if it was from an unknown source. Boca Raton Fire Rescue had 284 of these incidents between October and December of 2001. They continue today, averaging about 5 per year, and some result in criminal investigations. October 12th, another famous day. Erin O'Connor, an NBC employee who was exposed to the Tom Brokaw envelope, is confirmed to have cutaneous or skin exposure anthrax. She first noticed the lesion, though, on September 25th. Remember, the other gentleman first got sick on September 28th. The letter was addressed to Tom Brokaw. There was a major press conference held at the AMI building, and the special agent in charge was the lead person on this. I personally counted 36 satellite trucks out on Broken Sound Parkway, many from foreign press, but they all had uplinks to send the story back to their home bases. The FBI still kept saying there was no connection between what was going on in Boca Raton and anywhere else. And I'll play this little clip.
Earlier this week, the FBI said that they did not believe this was terrorist related. Are you changing your mind at all with the incident in New York?
No, sir.
And this?
No, sir. No, sir. Please understand. At this juncture of this investigation, I cannot entertain New York investigation because obviously it's not ours, but it just started today. At this juncture of this investigation, I'll say it one more time, we have no information whatsoever that correlates what we've got here with what New York has there. And likewise, we have no information to indicate that this is a terrorist action.
October 15th, the Department of Health announced that the anthrax spores were also found in the Boca Raton post office, and that was remedied pretty quickly with some hazmat cleanups. October 16th, 2001, press conferences were held at our City Community Center, and our Mayor Steve Abrams is here, and you'll get to see him on the screen here in just a second.
Steve Abrams do the introduction to all of the city security plans.
Thank you, Commander Mon. During these past 8 days, we have been working nonstop with all of the federal and state agencies. We again thank them for all of their efforts, but we felt it was important to re-emphasize to our citizens what we at the local level are doing to protect their safety. President Bush has stated on more than one occasion since September 11th that cities are the first line of defense against terrorist threats. Unfortunately, Boca Raton has become the first city in the country to have to deal with a bioterrorism attack, even if it appears to be directed at one company and not the city itself. Our hearts go out to the employees of American Media Incorporated. I've conducted many interviews.
That's just a small snippet of a much longer speech, but I wanted to keep it short. This is a younger version of me at the same conference.
Woods would like to say a few words as well.
Hello, basically just reiterating much of what Chief Scott said. We have extra hazmat techs on duty every day since Monday of last week, and we're handling all the incidents that come our way. And there's been no diminish of service to the other citizens and all the other calls going on in the city. We also have mutual aid with Palm Beach County and Delray Beach and West Palm Beach when it comes to hazmat teams. So if we were to run short, we could call on other resources. That's all. Thank you. And then later that day at Patrice Park, we had another press conference, and this one was led by Governor Jeb Bush.
Work in progress until these tests are complete, and that's the point I think that's important to recognize. People's fears are raised when there's wild speculation about this stuff, and I think it's appropriate to confirm these issues at the point when it's appropriate clinically to do so, and so that is the appropriate strategy as it relates to the questions of communication. That's a good question because I think at the beginning of this it took us a while to get organized, and I asked for the support of the FBI from Washington to come down so that there were clearer lines of communication between the varying agencies at each level of government, and they have responded. As it relates to the criminal investigation, I don't believe it's appropriate to be transparent at all. That investigation is best done as all investigations, criminal investigations, are done out of the light of the press, to be honest with you. As it relates to public health issues, I do think that we should have total transparency because the more information goes out, I think the less people's fears.
Do you think that's happened?
It is.
That it's been completely
All right, October 18th, New York Post confirmed an anthrax attack, and it was started on September 22nd. And the Palm Beach Post reported 31 additional anthrax exposures in Washington, D.C. at the U.S. Capitol. This was letters sent to members of Congress that were opened by staffers and then circulated through the U.S. Capitol and the staff buildings. And then the Palm Beach Post reported that the FBI leaves the AMI building for further investigations up north, also ending Boca Raton Fire Rescue's response to the initial incident. On the 19th through the 21st, Florida Governor Jeb Bush declared a state of emergency and requested federal assistance on October 19th. The Palm Beach Post reports that the federal EPA will decontaminate the AMI building. That EPA cleanup never happened. On November 17, 2001, we performed a recognition ceremony at the Boca Raton Resort, honoring all of the hazmat tech responders that were on the scene. Somewhere in the middle of that photograph, you'll see Glenn over there. He's in the back of the room. Craig, are you in that picture? No, you didn't make it in the picture. All right. January 23rd, 2002, our City Council approved Resolution 19-2002. Through a state emergency management grant, we were able to acquire a portable HAB-site gas chromatograph mass spectrometer and a cost of $188,000. That piece of equipment was in service until about 5 years ago when it was replaced with a newer piece of equipment. We also placed the vehicle you see in the picture there in service. That is our mobile lab unit. And when the main hazmat truck goes out of service, we use that in its place until it can be returned to service. That vehicle is still in use 20 years later. It's a backup truck. August 27th through September 10th of 2002, the FBI and the CDC conducted another round of evidence collection at the AMI building. However, they didn't use much of our services that time. And there were promises again that the EPA was going to handle decontamination of the AMI building. That was documented in the book Anthrax by Robert Graysmith. I cite the page number. He said it actually happened. It didn't happen. It hasn't been corrected in the book either. October of 2002, the first book was published on the anthrax attacks. This was called The Demon in the Freezer by Richard Preston. Almost 2/3 of the book talks about smallpox, and only about 1/3 of the book dealt with anthrax. So you don't want to buy that book. Plus, it was early in the process, and it gave some basic information at the beginning, but the investigation was still just starting. We're going to jump to April 15th of 2003. The AMI building and its 5 acres of land were purchased for $40,000, still contaminated, by David Rustine. And he was going to decontaminate the building and then start using it again. And October 1st of 2003, the next book out was The Anthrax Letters by Leonard Cole. There's a newer book that you'll see later on that he published after the death of the primary suspect. So he updated his book and republished it, but this was the first. And again, you don't want to go with this one because it was early in the process if you're looking to buy a book. If you're going to just go to the library and read them, then that's fine. You know, that's a good thing to do. November 2003, the first edition of Anthrax was published. And in very tiny print there, it says that there were subsequent re-editions put out in 2004, 2008, and in 2021. So you want to go with the 2021 edition if that's the book you want to get. It was called The Hunt for the Anthrax Killer by Robert Graysmith. It gave the most detailed account of many aspects, especially the pre-Ivins aspects of the incident. And it was the only book that gave great deal as to the decontamination of the Brentwood Post Office in the outskirts of Washington, D.C. Between January 11th, 2004 and May 31st of 2005, the next attempt to decontaminate the AMI building started, led by Rudy Giuliani of Bio1 and Sabre Technical Services. There was a press conference on January 13th, 2004. I think the mayor was there for that. May 31st, Bio1 claims that the AMI building is clean, but refuses to provide written evidence due to a contract dispute with the building owner. So it still stayed locked up, quarantined. In 2004 and 2005, we had 3 hurricanes, Francis, Jean, and Wilma. And we were able to keep that building secured during the entire time. So we checked on the building, make sure all the windows were still intact, none of the bad stuff had blown out of it, and it was still in good shape. August 23rd of 2006, a U.S. District Judge, Donald Middlebrooks, dismissed a $2 million lawsuit brought by Greg Matheson to recover the value of 1,400 lost famous photos from inside the AMI building. They apparently disappeared during some of the decontamination, and he dismissed the case. Between February 12th and the 22nd of 2007, Marcor Remediation, another contractor, finished the decontamination of the AMI building and turned the results over to the Palm Beach County Health Department, which on February 27, 2007, reopened the building. It was the first building to be contaminated and the last one to be cleaned 5 years and 4 months later. There was an ongoing investigation from the first day to this day, July of 2008, when Bruce Ivins commits suicide. He was a scientist at USAMRIID, which is located in Fort Detrick, Maryland, north of DC. And he was the only person really to have access to the Ames anthrax contained in container RMR 1029. They did DNA testing in New Mexico to know what the products were from the envelopes from the US Capitol and from the Brokaw letter to the DNA of the anthrax in that container, and they matched. And believe it or not, there's DNA for stuff like that. And this scientist was the only one that had access to that container, was in his laboratory. He commits suicide just before potentially being arrested by the FBI. He had given several statements to them, and there's more about him if you want to read it in all those books. But the evidence was pretty strong that he was the one that did it. The other interesting thing is that there were no psychological exams done for people that were dealing with these deadly pathogens back then. And this guy had a very checkered past when it came to his mental health. And if they had done psychological testing, he probably never would have been anywhere near deadly stuff. December 4th, 2008, another lawsuit. American Personality Photos versus John Mason. Lawsuit was dismissed by a federal judge. The lawsuit was filed in May 2008 over the lost Elvis in the coffin photo. So all the photo lawsuits didn't go anywhere. March 4th, 2009, there was an Anthrax Investigations Act of 2009 introduced or filed by U.S. Representative Rush Holt out of New Jersey. The legislation, however, was not adopted. Remember we talked about Leonard Cole. This was the second book he put out after the death of Ivins, April 1, 2009, The Anthrax Letters, and case closed at the bottom there. June 7th, 2011, Mirage Man, Bruce Ivins and the Anthrax Attacks, America's Rush to War by David William. It was the best coverage of Bruce Ivins and the case against him, and it won a Pulitzer Prize. So that might be one you want to circle as a good book. September 13, 2011, American Anthrax, Fear, Crime, and the Investigation of the Nation's Deadliest Bioterror Attack. This was the best coverage of the victims of the attack, especially those in the New York area and the Washington, D.C. area, and the best coverage of how the U.S. Postal Service handled the attacks. November 11th, 2011, a $2.5 million settlement is reached with the family of AMI photo editor Robert Stevens by the federal government following a wrongful death lawsuit. November 10th, 2012, A Crime Like Any Other. What the Facts Say About Dr. Bruce Ivins and the Anthrax Attacks of 2001. My problem with this book is the author blended theories into facts. He would mix the two together, and it was pretty confusing at times, and I thought it was a bit distorted. But it was the best explanation of how the name Ames anthrax strain came to be. It all had to do with somebody using an envelope to send postage or send something free, and the name Ames stuck to it because the name Ames was on the prepaid envelope. But that's an interesting story. October 15, 2014, the 2001 Anthrax Deception, A Case for Domestic Conspiracy by Graham McQueen. This book is controversial because it speculates that the origins of the September 11th attacks and the October anthrax attacks were connected. And it was a lot of conspiracy stuff in this book. March 19, 2018, Recounting the Anthrax Attacks, Terror and the Anthrax Task Force, The Evolution of Forensics by the FBI. R. Scott Decker was an FBI agent on this case. Best coverage of what the FBI did behind the scenes. I like this book. And best mention of Boca Raton Fire Rescue Hazmat Team. There's a page in there about us. So that was nice of them to recognize us in this book. January 1, 2020, Inside the Hot Zone, a soldier on the front lines of biological warfare. This is a colonel in the U.S. Army that wrote this, and only about half the book is about the anthrax attack, but he makes the case that he thinks that Bruce Ivins was innocent. So he was a co-worker with him and felt that he didn't do it. November 28, 2021, just this past fall, there was a special called The Hot Zone Anthrax, aired on the National Geographic Channel, based on the work of Richard Preston. Remember, he was one of the early authors that we covered. It was a 6-episode docudrama, and episode 1 included the events that occurred in Boca Raton. The only thing I found a little bit confusing was I thought the timeline when the incident was declared a terrorist event was a bit sketchy compared to what I know really happened in the real world. But I thought overall that the acting was good. The one other funny thing is they had Mrs. Stevens driving her husband to the hospital to JFK Hospital. I think they lived in Atlantis or something, or Lantana, but they were driving past the Intercoastal in West Palm Beach. So they took a little liberty with that one too, you know. But anyway, you can still see it on TV. It's a good docudrama. It covers a lot of the stuff. It's in memory of the 5 people that passed away. Robert Stevens, Thomas Morris was a U.S. postal worker at D.C. at the Brentwood Post Office. Same with Joseph Kursine, another postal employee. And then the 2 residents, one in the Bronx, New York, and one in Oxford, Connecticut, Kathy Nugent and Adelie Lundgren. These are the 5 people that died. Now, there were at least 50 or 60 other people that got sick but recovered, and there were thousands of people that showed up at Delray Beach Public Health Unit to get tested. That was pretty scary back then. And I'll be happy to answer questions that I may be able to answer. In the picture here, you'll see our hazmat truck at the scene of the AMI incident, and you'll see FDNY Rescue 4 at the World Trade Center. And then you'll see the 2 units together at our fire support building. So any questions for me? Yes? Yes?
This is kind of a strange one. So you said questions you could answer. There are still some things that you can't answer.
No, I'm not an expert on all of it. I do have Glenn here, and Glenn was more on the scene than I was, so if there's a question that having to do with the boots on the ground, I was a chief, I was up here, and he was at the scene.
Exactly where is the AMI building? Is it
5401 Broken Sound Parkway. It's north of Yamato, between Congress Avenue and Military Trail.
and it's still there?
Yes, the building was cleaned up, and it's reoccupied by a new person now. Yes?
I remember that when I was working with the city, our mail was put in boxes and sorted and checked for powder and stuff of that. Do you recall any?
Oh yeah, I checked my own mail outside for 3 or 4 months. And the whole postal service changed with how they would clear mail, especially going to the federal government in Washington, D.C. If you think you're going to write a letter to the president, it's really going to go on his desk. It ain't. It's going to be cleared somewhere else in the greater Washington, D.C. area before maybe an image of that letter will finally show up, but not the real letter. Yes?
This is kind of for Mayor Steve. So I came to work here in 2002, and I've been to Fort Lauderdale City Hall quite a bit, but I never had to go through like this routine, like you're at the airport, and you come to Boca Raton City Hall, and you had to surrender your keys, and you get, oh my gosh, and was that the result of this? Yeah.
Mayor, would you like to say something? It's all yours.
That actually relates to 9/11 and the fact, as I'm sure many of you recall, the terrorists who attacked the World Trade Center were training and living here in South Florida, including in Boca Raton, including using our library and the computers, including using 7-Elevens to transfer funds and a variety of things, and that's why you had heightened security. But turning to the topic at hand, because you definitely, Tom, took me down memory lane, and some things did come to mind. First, that this city, they know it every day, but owes a debt of gratitude to the Boca Raton Fire Rescue Department. And, and the reason that is because even though we see that it was a national and international story, the fact is that when an incident like this occurs, it's the local responders that have to show up initially. And so that's exactly, of course, what happened. Boca Raton Fire Rescue and Boca Raton Police Department came to the scene immediately. And then you had the FBI and the different state and federal agencies. And in fact, the anecdote that was told to me at the time was that when the FBI got here, they thought, well, we're, in this small, medium-sized city, and they, we're gonna have to take over the entire scene. And then they looked at our fire rescue folks and said, wait a minute, you look familiar. And it turned out that some of our personnel had trained the FBI in hazardous materials response. Because we really, we emphasize training at Boca Raton Fire Rescue, and we have a very proficient department when it comes to hazmat, because, we have the two freight railroad corridors, we have an airport, we have I-95. Of course, we never had anthrax before, but nobody else did either. So they, as the chief said, started to rely more on us. And it was interesting, you showed the clip with Governor Bush, who really summarized what occurred after these federal agencies descended on Boca. They had entirely different agendas. You had the FBI that treated the building as a crime scene, and as Governor Bush said, there you want to minimize the information, you're trying not to give away too much when you're trying to track down the perpetrator. And then on the other hand, you had the CDC treating this obviously as a public health crisis that wanted to disseminate a lot of information. So it was a tension there. We were not getting a whole lot of information over at City Hall. And so I was talking on a daily basis to the CEO of AMI. And as I think AMI publishes, well, we saw the National Enquirer, the photos of Elvis and everything. And so there were a lot of rumors, a lot of misinformation at the time, and I was getting the correct information from the CEO of AMI. So a couple of months later, I was asked to testify in Washington, D.C. before a Senate subcommittee about our experience here in Boca, and told them that one thing they could do would be to improve the communication, because I was learning the factual information from the National Enquirer. So that, of course, became the headline the next day. Reuters headline, Mayor gets information from the National Enquirer. But the fact is, they have a lot of great back channels, and they had the accurate information that I was not getting elsewhere. So, it was quite an interesting part of our time then. Thanks for presenting it, and I would just say one last thing, and that is, we all looked a lot better.
Thank you. Glenn, do you have anything you can add? Glenn was on the boots on the ground there back then. Glenn left our department as deputy chief, went on to become fire chief in Boynton Beach, and now he's left that and he's a consultant for the town of Highland Beach, working on their new fire department. So welcome, Glenn.
Thank you. Can we go back in the slideshow a little bit to the beginning, probably the first 3 slides in.
All right, let me see if I can find it.
And then to where we're deconning the guy coming out of the building. Do you remember that?
All right, like right there?
Yeah. All right, so let me tell you a story about, this is the guy, his name is Scott. And we were on the scene for actually around 30 days. We did 24 hours, like 2 weeks, and then back then we did a 12-hour day. But we were on the scene for like 30 plus days doing the evidence collection, and we were helping at decon. So I was actually there for like 20 of those 30 days. It was a long week. But he was, he's coming out of the building right now. And then go forward a little bit, one more slide forward. So one day, we'd seen all those guys out there looking at our scene. There were cameras all over the place. And he said, you know what, we gotta let them know we're still strong, and we're still here, and we're not going anywhere, because this is going all over the world after 9/11 and all that stuff. So his dad was actually a retired officer in the, I think it was an admiral in the Navy. And this flag was on his casket. So he went home, got it, and the next day we put it up. And it stayed up for the duration. And that was just him basically telling the world, we're here. We're not going anywhere. We're still strong and we're still doing the job. But that is probably one of the most inspirational stories of that whole incident, was that attitude that, hey, we're not going to go anywhere. We're not afraid of it. We're here. We'll do our job and do it correctly. So I got a lump in my throat because it was impressive. It was emotional that day. That's a good story. I should end here.
Any other questions? There's still refreshments here. There's still lists. I have some business cards over here if anybody wants to contact me. Yes?
I'd just like to say the story isn't over yet. There's a citizen's petition to the U.S. Attorney General, Congress, and a special grand jury to still investigate the Anthrax investigation. Because there are a lot of people who
Don't believe it. Yeah.
No, they think it's like a Kennedy assassination.
There's conspiracy stuff out there.
When I first said that the guy got it from hunting.
Yeah.
Well, so Tom, is this still an open case?
I don't think so. I think the FBI closed the case. But Congress can do whatever they want to, do an investigation. Yes?
I think we owe a debt of gratitude to all of you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Was the source of the anthrax determined?
Oh, yes. It came from that flask, RMR 1029. There was a gentleman in New Mexico at a university out there that developed DNA testing of anthrax. And he was able to match it exactly, the powder from the envelopes for Brokaw and the powder from the envelopes from the Capitol were both held were found. Plus, they also found an envelope. The U.S. Postal Service searched all those bagged envelopes that they had and found another one that had never been delivered. And all of those envelopes were matched, a DNA match to the flask that was in Bruce Ivan's laboratory. And he was the only one with access to it.
Where did he get it?
Well, he was a scientist at USAMRIID, Fort Detrick, which their whole thing was first was to make bioweapons, and then it was to make defense for bioweapons. They worked for the federal government and the Army, and unfortunately, he wasn't wrapped too tight.
He was working on a vaccine.
Yeah, he had vaccine stuff too. Yep. Yeah. But there's clear evidence that he's the one that did it, but he committed suicide just before he was to be arrested. Yes. That's what the autopsy said.
Not a good result of suicide. Oh, it's very significant.
Yes? Well, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Have a great day.